players, why that means we might see Justin Fields starting by week 1. And when there's a top 10 quarterback list, you know Dan Orlovsky is going to have something to say. We'll reveal his own list and why Mina couldn't wait to destroy it today. All right, you see him right there. Dan and Mina are with you for this hour. Field Yates as well to make sense of it all, right, Field? And coming up, someone will tell you why the best part of Jalen Hurts' game is something his Eagles coach and OC have never used before. But let's roll with the reason today is important. 2 weeks from today, veteran players will report to Packers training camp. But will Aaron Rodgers be among them? Or a team change be in his future? Last season, Tom Brady became the second starting QB to win a Super Bowl with multiple teams. The first was Peyton Manning, who did it with the Colts and Broncos. Peyton had some thoughts on this Rodgers-Packers quarterback situation.
The fact that Aaron Rodgers might not play this year is, I can't fathom it. He's too good of a player, too fun to watch for the fans. I personally hope it's in Green Bay. My gut is he's not coming to Denver. My gut is Denver's going to, have Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater be their quarterback. And at this point, you kind of know what your plan is. We can't be having a new quarterback up 3 weeks before the season.
So, Dan, I realize he's Aaron Rodgers, right? And he's one of the greatest to ever play the game. But we're still only 2 weeks away. How hard is it, even no matter who you are, to mesh with a new team and with if you're going to go to Denver, you're going to change everything up? How hard would that be for him to do?
I think it'd be a lot harder and much more important and urgent for everybody else outside of Aaron Rodgers. First of all, it becomes, where are you coming from and where are you going scheme-wise? Now, Aaron Rodgers grew up in the Mike McCarthy, Matt LaFleur scheme, which is a West Coast offense. West Coast offense is concepts and words over numbers and digits. And now he's going to go to, say, Denver with Pat Shurmur, who, again, grew up in the West Coast offense. So for Aaron, it's not like this English to Spanish 180-degree turn. The analogy I would say is it's like knowing what a noun or a verb or an adjective is, and then, okay, now I got to go learn what a pronoun or an adverb is. It's just a lateral step up. And so it's not going to be that big a deal for Aaron. It's a bigger deal for everybody else. Let's say Pat Shurmur goes, okay, we're going to use some motion and naked bootlegs, right, when we roll out. And Aaron goes, well, if I go to my left, I don't like a comeback out there. I like a corner. Well, the receivers in Denver know that this bootleg to the left gives me this split on the numbers, right? Well, if it's corner, he's got to get inside. So they got to learn a bunch of new stuff. Or let's say they're going to use much more pre-snap motion like they did in Green Bay. Well, now the offensive line's got to realize how that impacts their blocking. If Aaron goes, well, I want to utilize it. So I think it's a tremendous amount more impact on everybody else getting comfortable with what Aaron would want rather than vice versa.
Right. Yeah, Dan, you make some great points there about the Packers' offense and their scheme. And not just, by the way, because you're dressed like a retired Green Bay Packer today coming home, but because of your knowledge, I think, of that offense and really how Aaron embraced it. Part of the reason he was successful last year because he's Aaron Rodgers, he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but also because he embraced some of the concepts you were talking about, the pre-snap motion, the things that Matt LaFleur brought to Green Bay. And to leave that team, not only would there be an adjustment period, but frankly, I think it would be a downgrade. I've been talking a lot about how much I love this Denver roster. I think they're really underrated in terms of the skill players. I love the defense. But Green Bay has a lot of advantages schematically, from a coaching perspective. Sure. And then I think as a complete team, when you look at this depth chart from top to bottom, from the skill players, the much maligned skill players are actually really solid, very good offensive line. And then on defense, I think it's a defense that was average last year that I expect to improve this season. We saw Rashawn Gary, who I've talked about as a potential breakout player, pass rusher on the rise. They've got a couple of really great safeties. I drafted Eric Stokes to compete with Kevin King. On top of all that, they play in the NFC, and if I was NFC North, rather, and if I was Rodgers, I'd rather be in a very winnable division than in the AFC West, where you have to deal with the likes of Patrick Mahomes.
Field, it feels like we've decided that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Packer again. He's going to go back, and it seems like that's where everybody's trending right this second. Is that where we are here?
Well, first of all, Laura, if I'm a little bit shook throughout the show, I apologize. I wasn't expecting Dan Orlovsky to draw a metaphor that involved parts of speech. That's usually Mina's territory.
He's an
so
English
I'm going to make it
major.
through the next hour without too many fumbles, but I can't make any promises.
I don't even know what they
No,
mean,
I don't think
Phil.
anything's
I
changed,
don't
to be
even know what a
candid,
noun or
Laura.
adverb
I
is.
think that all the problems that Aaron Rodgers had with the Packers that were brought to light by Adam Schefter on the day of the draft in late April have persisted. As a matter of fact, we've seen no movement on any front that leads me to believe that Rodgers is any more inclined to go back to Green Bay. So while it's clear to all of us on this show that Aaron's best chance to win another Super Bowl would to find some middle ground between he and the organization and run it back. They've won 26 regular season games over the past 2 years. It's clear on principle right now that isn't option A in Aaron's mind. And if it is, I think we all agree as well that the Broncos are one of the most palatable trade suitors. And while Peyton Manning is right, and Dan made outstanding points about how a quarterback has to transition, a trade to Denver wouldn't be about whether the offense was running at full Voltron by week 1. It's about the opportunity for Denver, a stacked roster everywhere but quarterback, to acquire a player who's coming off of an MVP season who could be their guy for the next 5 years. I still think if he's traded, the place that I will be looking, if I were Green Bay, for the best set of assets and landing spot would be the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and I agree completely, Field, that it's not just like a one-year rental. But even this year, like let's say the trade happens and he goes to Denver. First of all, they got a very good defense that would allow for like some of that growing pains offensively. Like you don't have to go score 30 right out the gate to win some games in Denver. And then the second thing would be that like the understanding that this schedule for them is kind of cake in the first month in Denver. So there's like for a somewhat seamless transition for Aaron Rodgers. Also, I'm wearing green because it's the open week, guys. And if you guys don't know that correlation,
it's very good.
We are no longer friends.
Okay, well, it makes sense. But the other thing that Field and I didn't get the memo on was that it's Christmas in July today with you and Mina. So I guess that while you wore green, Mina contributed
firing.
with a very holiday feeling here. From one NFC quarterback in the North, NFC North, to another, Rodgers has the third most touchdown passes over the last 3 seasons, but you might be surprised who's 5th on this list as you look at the most touchdown passes in that part of the NFL. Kirk Cousins has 91 touchdown passes in his Vikings career, and even though Minnesota missed the playoffs last year, they have their eye on the prize in 2021. Here's linebacker Anthony Barr on the state of the team. He says, I really do believe that we have a Super Bowl winning team this year. Obviously, there's a lot of steps to get to that point. I've been through good seasons and bad seasons with this team, but I really feel like this year is going to be special. So, Anthony Barr, he's right. He's been through the good and the bad there. He's making a note to point out this year as a really positive one, and maybe some big things are going to happen. And some of that could have to do with the fact that there's uncertainty around Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But Mina, with all of that, and maybe Rodgers is out of the division, are the Vikings really in that conversation of Super Bowl contenders?
No. Sorry, Anthony. I do think if Rodgers is in the division, they're the favorites to win. But I think the Vikings are a really balanced team. I think they're a team that's going to be better this season, in large part because while the offense was good and they'd actually been consistently very solid since Kirk Cousins arrived, the defense took a huge nosedive last season. It was very un-Mike Zimmer-esque. And they get players back. A lot of that was because of personnel. So you have Danielle Hunter coming back from injury. Michael Pierce, incredibly underrated defensive lineman. More experience in that secondary. They, to me, are one of the units in the NFL that's most likely to improve and most likely to put them in the conversation for a wild card. But Super Bowl contenders in a conference that has the Bucks, the Rams, I just don't see it for Minnesota.
All right, so the Vikings have a Super Bowl winning offense. 1. 2, Mike Zimmer's been a part of a lot of great defenses like Mina referenced, but he knows that he can't win a Super Bowl with a style or scheme of defense that he's been great in the NFL with. The last 15 years, he's as good defensive mind as we've had. But in his words, he said he can't call defense the way he has in the past. Now, the Vikings are a defense that, one, has lived in a lot of base defense, 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 4 defensive backs, okay? They've brought a ton of pressures in the double-A gaps right next to each center. They played a lot of middle field open, 2 safety, like shell coverages. And Mike Zimmer has said, we can't do that anymore. So the fascinating thing is, how does one of the best defensive minds in football, and honestly, he's got a ton of pressure to fix this. He's there as a defensive-minded head coach. How does he reinvent a good defense? Is it taking one of those linebackers off the field and putting a nickel back on the field? Did they draft a guy like Kaz Surratt out of North Carolina to play that fringe defensive back linebacker? Are they going to play with 5 DBs? That is one of the more fascinating stories in the NFL to me is this. Mike Zimmer has to win, and his defense has to be the reason they win. This is Super Bowl caliber offense. Kirk Cousins has proven he's plenty good enough. Christian Darrisaw is going to be very good. They got a great run game, 2 elite receivers. Is the defense going to be good enough to make sure that this is a Super Bowl contending roster? Because if it's not, Mike Zimmer will be out of a job.
Okay, Field, we're going to you in 1 second, but Mina, I got to give you a chance here. Go fast. What you wanted to say?
No, I'll be really quick because I think Dan made some excellent